What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another Pioneer video, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Niv Delight deck for the Pioneer format. This is a deck that I had in my kind of like tier 1.5 range, probably more towards the bottom, like kind of teetering on that like tier 2 kind of plateau, but I think there's a lot of things going on with this Niv Delight deck where it can kind of survive in the early game to kind of enact its mid-range game plan and cast some of its very powerful spells, because I think it is one of the few mid-range decks that go absolutely over the top of most of the format, if not all of the other mid-range decks in the format. Of course, before we get too deep into the Niv Delight deck, we talk about the ins and outs and kind of where I'm getting my opinions from and kind of why I have this ranked where I have it in my tier list for this year. If you're not already subscribed to the channel and you want to see more videos from me, where we do a lot of videos based on the Modern Pioneer format, along with some other longer form videos, so if any of that interests you, please consider subscribing and ring the notification bell so you know when those videos get posted. It's a free, easy way to support me and my content as we march towards 1,000 subscribers. We are getting so close, and I mean, it's just the fact that it's almost a reality is insane, and I appreciate all the support that I've gotten from people, whether you've been a long-time supporter of the channel or just recently subscribed. You know, I'm greatly appreciative of it, and you know, just a crazy journey so far, and I look forward to continuing it all here and venturing into the formats that I absolutely love playing. So with all that said, let's go ahead, let's talk about Niv Delight. So there's kind of like two parts to this Niv Delight deck that obviously give the deck its name. The first part of it is this card, Niv Mizzet Reborn, and I remember like this card kind of being like a gimmick sort of thing when it was originally released, I believe in War of the Spark, and I mean, it was kind of a weird card, and it was just kind of, it was odd. All right, like when it first came out, I believe this was really before Pioneer was even a format. It's like, what good is this card going to be? You know, it was kind of like a sweet like draft card, but that's kind of all it was. But little did we know that from like around the inception of the Pioneer format up until now, that this 5-color archetype would be kind of like a mainstay of the format, maybe never really pushing into like that tier 1 status or being the best deck, what have you. It has been a solid role player in the metagame, though, and a deck that a lot of players kind of gravitate towards. So Niv Mizzet Reborn is one of every color for a 6/6 flying legendary creature, Dragon Avatar, that when it enters the battlefield, you reveal the top 10 cards of your library. For each color pair, so meaning like Azorius, Gruul, Rakdos, so on, for each of those colors pair, you put a card exactly those colors from among them into your hand. You put the you choose them, and then you put the chosen cards in your hand. You put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So this essentially allows you to draw cards without really drawing cards, so it gets around some of the other, you know, things like Shieldred and much less played, but still kind of relevant in Narset. So this is like a way that you can get some card advantage. You get a big 6/6 flyer on the battlefield. It's a huge body. It's evasive and can close out the game fairly quickly, honestly. The fact that this deck has the ability to get a Niv Mizzet Reborn on the battlefield on like turn 4, which is not, you know, the one-sided show and tell levels of like Broken of putting like a 6-power flyer into play, but still very good because this does offer you some card advantage in a deck that really wants to use every spell that it has to try and close out the game, or at least try to get a handle on the game to make it very hard for your opponent to come back from. So this is kind of like the main creature of the deck. You used to play 4 copies of this like for a long time, and it's slowly kind of dwindled in usage and been reserved for more of a bring to light target than being kind of like a mainstay of the deck, especially in like these Yorion variants. However, that does bring us to our second part of this deck, and this is a card, Bring to Light. So Bring to Light synergizes pretty well Niv Mizzet Reborn and vice versa, because Niv Mizzet Reborn allows you to get off its ability because it is 2 colors, green and blue, and then Bring to Light says that you can search your library for a creature, instant, or sorcery card with mana value less than or equal to the number of colors a mana spent to cast a spell. Exile that card, then shuffle. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. So Bring to Light allows us to get a creature, instant, or sorcery card, essentially with mana value 5 or less if we end up paying all 5 colors, 4 or less if we pay with 4 different colors, and so on. So obviously if you get all 5 colors, you're able to go get a Niv Mizzet Reborn or even a Niv Mizzet Supreme. You're able to go and get it and then cast it without paying its mana cost, meaning that more than likely you're just going to get to kind of do the thing that you want all over again. There's a lot of really good cards, and of course all the cards in this deck, minus Leyline Binding, it can end up being gotten from, well, I guess minus like some of these other cards here, but you know what I mean? Like the important spells and stuff like that are, you know, able to be gotten off of Bring to Light. Some notable ones like Deadly Cover Up and Sunfall. These are going to wrath the board. Sunfall is going to exile all those creatures instead of destroying them, and you're going to be able to incubate X, where X is the number of exiled creatures this way, meaning that you get like an artifact token that has a bunch of counters on it. And you can pay 2 to transform it, and it becomes a 0/0 with those +1/+1 counters on it. Deadly Cover-Up will destroy all creatures, and if you collect Evidence 6, meaning that you exile 6 converted mana cost worth of things from your graveyard, you can then exile a card from an opponent's graveyard. So it doesn't even have to be like a creature that was, you know, destroyed in all of this, like some of the newer rats that we see, like in Bloomburrow. This one allows you to go get a card from your opponent's graveyard, no matter what it is, and then you're able to get a surgical extraction type effect on it, where you're going to be able to take all the copies from their hand, graveyard, and library, and exile them, and then they draw cards for however many of those cards were taken out of their hand. Some other notable cards, there's some one-ofs in the deck. We have Riveteer's Charm, Unmoored Ego, Deafening Clarion, and Molten Collapse as kind of like one-ofs in this deck. You even have Abrupt Decay. Molten Collapse and Abrupt Decay, not nearly as exciting to get as something like maybe a, you know, obviously like a Wrath. You don't really necessarily want to get Deafening Clarion, but you can kind of get this if you already kind of have a board presence. You can just deal 3 damage to all the creatures. All of your creatures are pretty big. I mean, all the important ones like Omnath, Niv-Mizzet, and, both Niv-Mizzets are pretty big. So you're going to be able to Deafening Clarion, destroy all the small creatures, give your creatures lifelink, and have a huge life total swing in your favor. Or even using these to kind of like trade off again, kind of gain some life, destroy some of your opponent's bigger creatures. And then, of course, you have some of these other ways to like kind of get advantage to where you can end up winning the game later. We have in the enchantment, well, actually artifacts and enchantments, some of the more important things. We have Ancient Cornucopia from the big score set that was in the Outlaws of Thunder Junction set, that for 3 mana, it's essentially a mana rock that'll add a mana of any color, and then whenever you cast a spell that's one or more colors, you can gain a life for each of that spell's color. You only do it once each turn, but obviously when you have things like Niv-Mizzet Reborn, Omnath, Niv-Mizzet Supreme, even like Riveteer's Charm, a lot of the time you're going to be able to cast these spells, and you're going to be able to gain 5 life on your turn, and then possibly gain 2 life on your opponent's turn, or even 3 in the case of like Riveteer's Charm. Just a really nice way to kind of ramp. You can also end up being a pretty good blink target for Yorion the Sky Nomad, which a lot of these creatures are really good like blink targets, because like Omnath's going to draw a card, and Niv-Mizzet, you're going to be able to look at the top 10 cards and potentially get 2, 3, 4, 5 cards into your hand. Probably even more, honestly. You have these Up the Beanstalks that draw a card whenever they enter, or you cast a spell with converted mana cost 5 or greater. So when you cast your Yorion, you're going to be able to draw cards, and then you're going to exile Beanstalks, get to draw more cards. Exiling Fable is going to make another 2/2 Shaman and let you kind of go through the chapters again and get a Reflection of Kiki eventually. Leyline Binding, you can kind of reset and get a more impactful creature if need be. The mana base is filled with a ton of Triomes and of the Shocklands. You do have some lands like Woodland Cemetery that will come into play tapped unless you control Swamp or Forest. So like these are kind of like untapped, or lands that are more than likely coming to play untapped. You have 4 Fable Passage, and 1 of each basic land in your deck, so that you're able to kind of fetch, go get the missing color that you need, and combo very well with Omnath, because playing a Fable Passage on like turn 4 or turn 5 with a Omnath in play just means that you're going to be able to trigger its ability to get, you know, every color except for black in your mana pool. You're going to be able to use the Fabled Passage to go get the Swamp, and then you're going to be able to Bring to Light for 5 and still have 4 mana left over to cast, you know, one of these other spells, or 2 of these other spells if you have something like Vanishing Verse or Molten Collapse, or go like Pillage the Bog and then go to your opponent's turn, Vanishing Verse, so on. Just a lot of advantage you can get, and Omnath can definitely start creating some distance from your opponent, just in the fact that you're going to be able to gain 4 life whenever you play a land, and just overall kind of be a nuisance on the battlefield if your opponent is not able to disrupt it. One cool trick in this deck that we used to see quite a bit, and it's only really reserved for 1 card now, is the interaction of Bring to Light and Valki. So with Bring to Light, you are able to go get Valki with it because it is a creature. You exile it, and then you may cast a card without paying its mana cost. So with how Bring to Light interacts with Valki, is the fact that you can go get Valky with the Bring to Light. How many times can I say Valky and Bring to Light in the same sentence? So you go and get Valky. You then go to cast the card. You actually get to choose what side you want to cast. Some would say Valky's front side is pretty good, but Tibalt Cosmic Imposter is miles better. So you can essentially get a 7-mana Planeswalker, pay basically 5 mana and be tutorable, and it has some pretty relevant effects. So when it enters, you get an emblem. Whenever you may play cards exiled with Tibalt Cosmic Imposter and spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast those spells. You exile the top card of each player's library as a +2, so this is like sort of kind of a way that you can get some card advantage. It's like virtually a draw 2, because you're going to be able to play those cards exiled with Tibalt, so you're able to like play lands from your opponents, or play their spells and be able to spend mana of any color. -3, exile target artifact or creature. It is technically exiled with Tibalt Cosmic Imposter, so you're able to then cast it later. And then -8, exile all cards from all graveyards, add 3 red mana, which goes again the same way, where you just exile the graveyards, you get 3 red mana, and then you're able to cast things from your opponent's graveyard or your own graveyard as though it were and spend mana as though it were mana of any color to play those things. So just a really powerful effect. Definitely really powerful if you can get this going super early, because it is going to generate a decent amount of card advantage, even though it is not technically drawing you cards. You are exiling cards, and you can just kind of get a ton of cards reserved, reserved, and then even if your opponent deals with a Tibalt, you have a Tibalt emblem, so you're still able to play those things that are exiled. So really neat card, kind of interesting. I've seen this being played a few times in the Niv Delight decks, and like actually physically seen it being played, and it's just been so good a lot of the time. So just something to keep in mind. The sideboard, we have Fatal Push, we have Dovin's Vetoes, Uncounterable Negate that we can actually get with our Niv Mizzet Reborn. We have Rest in Peace, Ashiok, Deafening Clarion, Mystical Dispute, and Krenko's Buzz Crusher. For those people that are still playing Lotus Field, because for some reason, Buzz Crusher doesn't target. It just destroys a non-basic land that a player controls, and you just choose the land. So, yeah, it just kind of a crazy thing, but that is how it works. Krenko's Buzz Crusher can kill a Lotus Field or a Thespian Stage, even if it would become a Lotus Field, to max punish your opponent for playing the Lotus Field deck. But yeah, that is the Niv Delight deck for the Pioneer format. Overall, it does a lot of things that I really like. It has a few different options kind of going for it, where, on turn 2, you can play Sylvan Caryatid, or you can play the Up the Beanstalk and, be able to cycle through your deck by being able to draw cards with Up the Beanstalk, go into Fable, the Mirror Breaker, and then Fable is going to kind of help you ramp, as well as, pitching some of the other, spells and stuff that you don't need to eventually find lands to be able to cast some of your other big threats, or just to be able to dig for something like a Bring to Light. This deck is kind of a well-oiled machine. I think a lot of the time it does kind of beat itself, where, you're stuck on like 2 or 3 lands and you don't really have anything to do with your mana. It can get kind of awkward, but overall, I think when this deck kind of gets to enact its game plan, it can just, drown your opponent in card advantage. It has plenty of different ways of dealing with some of the big heavy hitters of the format. It just has to get to that mid to late game. And this deck does have a few options. We talked about Lightning Helix, Abrupt Decay, Molten Collapse, and Vanishing Verse being ways that it's able to kind of interact with what your opponent has going on in the early game. It's kind of hard to aggro it out because, again, things like Lightning Helix, all this cheap removal. Plus, eventually, if you are not fast enough to even fight through all that stuff, and you get to like the mid game and you're seeing like Omnath being able to draw a bunch of cards, Niv Mizzet's going to Stonewall, more than likely the biggest creature on the battlefield as well. And then Ancient Cornucopia as well, just being something that even in multiples is going to be very annoying for your opponent to deal with, because if you have 2 of these in play and you cast a Mizzet, that's 10 life plus 4 life for all these other 2 costs or 2 color cards, which it ends up adding up very quickly when you are trying to win with combat damage. But yeah, that is the Niv Delight deck for the Pioneer format, and that's going to do it for me in this video. Hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like on the video. Comment down below what Pioneer deck you would like to see next. I'm going to try to get some games in with this Niv Delight deck and hopefully do the Thing, because the Thing is actually a lot of fun with this deck. I think it's a deck that is quite a bit of fun. I think it's more enjoyable than probably most of the decks in the format when it kind of gets to do its thing. You just have to be okay with sometimes, potentially losing to yourself because of just kind of like drawing the wrong half of your deck where you don't draw enough lands, or maybe you draw too many lands, things like that. That's just, the nature of Magic. But, that's going to do me with this video. Hope you all enjoyed it, and I hope to see you all in the next one.